They arrested an 82-year-old schoolteacher, but had no idea her son was the U.S. Secretary of Defense. It started with banana pudding. Clara Dorsey, with her hands still dusted in vanilla wafer crumbs, almost didn't go to the protest that morning. She was supposed to be baking for the Mount Olive Baptist Church fundraiser, but her best friend of over 50 years, Miss Lorraine, had asked her to come along. "They trying to close the bookmobile funding again," Lorraine had said over the phone. "If they cut that, what's left for these babies to read out here?" Clara had sighed. "I told myself I was done marching at my age." "You ain't got to march," Lorraine said. "Just show up. Stand with us. That's all." So Clara put on her sensible flats, grabbed her church shawl, and made her way to City Hall in Macon, Georgia. It wasn't a big crowd, maybe 50 people, mostly teachers, retirees, and a few high schoolers holding up signs that said things like, "Books, not bars," and "Invest in minds, not metal." The protest stayed calm. Folks sang a few old civil rights hymns under their breath. Someone read a short poem. Even the police presence was light. It felt more like a community cookout than a protest. But then someone shouted. And then someone ran. And just like that, everything shifted. There was yelling near the back of the crowd. Clara turned to look but couldn't see much. A few officers began pushing through the people, fast and with purpose. Lorraine grabbed Clara's arm. "Let's move back," she whispered. Before they could, an officer pointed directly at Clara. "You, stay right there." Clara blinked. "Me. Hands where I can see them." Confused, Clara instinctively raised her palms. "What's this about?" "You were seen defacing public property. Graffiti on a state building is a felony." "What?" she asked, looking around. "I didn't write nothing. I just got here 20 minutes ago." Another officer came up from behind and began pulling her wrists together. "You have the right to remain silent." Clara's voice trembled now. "Wait, baby, I think you got the wrong person." The metal of the cuffs bit into her skin. Someone tried to speak up on her behalf, but the officer waved them off. "We got a witness and footage. You can explain it to the judge." They walked her past the crowd toward the squad car. Some people pulled out phones. Others looked stunned. Lorraine tried to run after them, but an officer held her back. "This is Clara May Dorsey," she shouted. "She taught half this town how to read." But it didn't matter. The doors shut. The engine hummed. Inside the back seat, Clara sat in stunned silence, the sirens blaring over her thoughts. Her chest felt tight, not from panic. Clara didn't panic, but from the weight of something she hadn't felt in decades. Shame. Not because she did anything wrong, but because the people outside looked at her like she had. An officer in the front seat made a joke to the other one about grandma taggers. They both laughed. Clara looked down at her lap. She was still holding a folded paper napkin in one hand from the fundraiser, stained with a dot of banana pudding. She exhaled slowly. This wasn't supposed to happen. But sometimes the world don't care what's supposed to happen. It just does what it does. Booking took forever. They fingerprinted her, made her take off her earrings, and handed her an orange jumpsuit 2 sizes too big. Nobody explained much. A young officer, barely in his 20s, avoided her eyes while taking her mugshot. "Ma'am, stand against the wall. Just a quick picture." Clara gave him a look that could melt concrete. "You want me to smile too?" He flinched, looked at his screen, and muttered, "No, Mom." She didn't smile. They led her to a holding cell with fluorescent lights that flickered like they were struggling to stay alive. Inside were 2 younger women. One, maybe in her late 20s, had tattoos running up both arms and a busted lip. The other looked barely out of high school, legs pulled up to her chest, eyes red from crying. The door clanged shut behind Clara. The taller one looked her up and down. "Grandma, what you in for?" she asked with a crooked smirk. Clara didn't answer at first. She eased herself down onto the bench and folded her arms across her chest. "Vandalism," she finally said. Both girls blinked. You serious? I am, Clara replied, voice flat. Apparently, I done turned into a public menace. That got a little laugh out of the younger one. Even the girl with the busted lip cracked a smile. Clara leaned back and looked up at the stained ceiling. Didn't even finish my banana pudding. That's what really hurts. The three sat in silence for a few minutes. Then the girl with the tattoos spoke again. Name's Tisha. Clara nodded. Clara May. The quiet one whispered, I'm Lonnie. Well, Tisha and Lonnie, Clara said, pleased to meet you. Even if it is in the worst possible place. Tisha asked again, you really didn't do it? Clara turned and met her eyes. I've been walking this earth for 82 years. I've buried a husband, raised a son by myself, taught in the same school for 4 decades. I got arthritis in both knees and 2 stents in my heart. Baby, I didn't have the energy to hold a spray can, let alone run from a crime. Tisha whistled. 82. You don't look it. I moisturized. That made them laugh again. Not loudly, but just enough. They ended up talking about little things at first. Lonnie said she missed her daughter's 5th grade play that night. Tisha mentioned she was in for unpaid tickets and mouthing off to a cop. Clara just listened. Her voice wasn't needed every second, but when it was, it mattered. You got kids? Lonnie asked eventually. Clara smiled. 1. My boy. Smart as a whip. Used to sit at the kitchen table and read my dictionaries just for fun. Got a full ride to college. Never gave me 1 minute of trouble. You think he'll come get you out? Clara paused. If I ask him, he will. But you haven't. I will when the time's right. Tisha raised an eyebrow. Why wait? Clara looked at the door of the cell like she was staring through it. Because sometimes, baby, you got to let people dig their own holes before you hand them the ladder. The girls went quiet again. Later, when the lights dimmed a little and the noise outside died down, Clara pulled the thin blanket over her knees and leaned back against the wall. She didn't sleep. Not really. Her mind was already a few steps ahead. She wasn't scared. She was disappointed. Not in herself, but in a system she thought might have changed since she was young. Thought maybe it had grown some sense. But some roots go deep, and some people never stop watering them. The next morning, Clara was up before sunrise. Her body ached from the concrete bench, but she didn't complain. She folded the blanket neatly and sat waiting until the door finally buzzed open. 2 officers escorted her to the courtroom. Neither spoke. One of them glanced at her like she was just another box to check off before lunch. The courthouse in Bibb County hadn't changed much since the 70s. Peeling paint on the trim, water-stained ceiling tiles, and a vending machine that didn't take cards. But the courtroom, that was still polished, still meant to impress. Polished wood, brass railings, a giant flag, and Judge Gerald Whitman sitting up high like he was the king of something. He was in his late 60s, heavy set, with thick frame glasses and a voice that sounded like he smoked 2 cigars a day. People in town called him no nonsense, but Clara knew that was just a polite way of saying he didn't like to be questioned, especially by folks who looked like her. Clara walked in, shackled at the wrists and ankles. She kept her chin up. People in the gallery turned to stare. Some leaned in to whisper. One woman had the nerve to snicker. Clara caught her eye and didn't blink once. The woman looked away first. The bailiff read the charges. Felony vandalism of government property. Resisting arrest. Trespassing. Clara's brow furrowed. Resisting arrest. The judge looked up from his papers. Ma'am, you will speak only when spoken to. Clara raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. The public defender assigned to her case looked barely 30. He shuffled papers nervously and leaned over. Miss Dorsey, I haven't had much time to. I know, she said gently. Just try your best. The prosecutor stood and launched into a monologue like he was auditioning for a crime drama. Talked about civil unrest, a pattern of destruction, and how even elderly individuals could be exploited by activist groups to commit illegal acts. He gestured toward Clara without ever looking her in the eyes. The judge nodded. Then he turned to Clara. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" She stood slowly. "Your Honor, I didn't do what they're saying. I was there to support a friend. I don't even own a can of spray paint. This whole thing is a mistake." The judge adjusted his glasses. "Mistake or not, you were at the scene. If people can't follow the law, they face consequences." Clara stared at him. "Even if they didn't break it." He banged his gavel once. "I'm not here to debate philosophy with you, Miss Dorsey." The room went quiet. Then the judge said, "Due to the severity of the charge, I'm denying release until a full hearing can be scheduled." Clara blinked. "You're keeping me locked up. You can file for a bond hearing through your attorney." "Your Honor, I'm 82 years old. I have a heart condition. I taught in the city for 40 years. He shrugged. "Age doesn't make you above the law. And quite frankly, your attitude isn't helping your case." Clara leaned forward just slightly. "What attitude is that, sir?" "Dismissive, disrespectful." "I'm not being disrespectful," she said, calm as ever. "I'm being honest." He looked annoyed. "That's enough. Bailiff, take her back." Clara didn't move. "Before I go," she said, "may I make my one phone call?" The judge gave a tight nod. "Fine. Make it quick." They led her to a small room in the back. An officer dialed the number for her and handed her the receiver. She waited 2 rings. Then a voice. "Dorsey." She smiled faintly. "Eli, it's Mama." A pause, then, "Where are you?" "County jail. Macon." "What happened?" "I'll explain later. I need you here. Tomorrow." Courtroom 3B morning session. There was no panic in her voice. No fear. "All right," he said. His voice had changed. Lower. Harder. "You okay?" "I'm fine, baby. Just tired of this nonsense. I'm on my way." She hung up, handed the phone back, and looked the officer in the eye. "Y'all might want to dust off that judge's seat. Tomorrow's going to feel real different. And when a mother says it like that, you best believe something's coming." Clara slept better that night. Not because the bench got any softer or the lights stopped buzzing overhead. They didn't. But because she'd done what she needed to do. Back in her cell, Tisha and Lonnie leaned in like kids around a campfire. "You call your son," Lonnie asked, whispering like someone might be listening. Clara nodded, easing down onto the cold bench. "He said he's coming." "What'd he do again?" Tisha asked. Clara smiled, slow and proud. "He's the United States Secretary of Defense." Both girls blinked like they hadn't heard her right. "The real one?" Tisha asked. Clara just nodded again. Lonnie's mouth dropped open. "You serious?" "I am." Tisha leaned back, let out a long whistle, then grinned. "They arrested the Secretary of Defense's mama." "Oh, somebody going to lose their job." Clara didn't laugh. She wasn't there for revenge. "Eli don't like to showboat," she said. "But when something's wrong, he handles it." Back at the courthouse the next morning, something did feel different. The staff at the front desk were quieter. The security guards stood straighter. And a polished black SUV parked right out front, still gleaming from a fresh wash. Out stepped Elias Dorsey. Dark gray suit, clean-shaven, posture like a man raised to mean every word he says. He didn't come with a crowd. No reporters, no cameras. Just him and a thin briefcase. He walked through the metal detector like he had every right to be there. Because he did. The clerk at the check-in desk stammered. Sir, can I?" "I know where I'm going," Elias said, calm but direct. Courtroom 3B. Inside, the gallery was slowly filling up. Miss Lorraine had managed to make it in. A few folks from Clara's church, too. Nobody said much. They were there because they knew, because word had spread fast. Clara May Dorsey's son is flying down. And he's somebody. Judge Whitman sat at the bench, flipping through papers with one hand, sipping from a chipped coffee mug with the other. He didn't look up when Elias walked in, but other people did. The prosecutor glanced up, did a double take, and leaned over to whisper something to his assistant. The public defender, still the same nervous young man, froze like he'd just seen his final exam walk into the room. Clara was escorted in, wearing the same orange jumpsuit. Her wrists were cuffed again, but her chin was up. When she saw Elias, she didn't smile big, but her eyes lit up just for a second. Just enough. He nodded once. Small, just for her. The judge finally looked up, annoyed by the sudden quiet. His eyes landed on Elias, and for a split second, something flickered across his face. Not fear, but recognition. A shift. "Are you counsel on this case?" Judge Whitman asked. Elias stood. "No, Your Honor. I'm here as family." The judge leaned back slightly. "And your name?" "Elias Dorsey." Another pause. Clara watched the judge's mouth tighten ever so slightly. The name meant something now. The weight of it settled over the room like a blanket. "I see," the judge said. "Well, we'll proceed with the hearing." But from that moment on, the tone in the room changed. Every word spoken had weight. Every silence had purpose. The hearing resumed, but nobody was really listening to the court clerk read out the docket. All eyes were on Elias Dorsey. He didn't speak right away. He just sat, still as stone, watching. His presence alone made the air feel tighter. The prosecutor, clearly rattled, fumbled through his notes. Even the court reporter kept glancing up between keystrokes. Clara sat quietly at the defense table, her wrists resting lightly on the polished wood. Her public defender looked at Elias, then whispered to Clara, "Should I say something?" She shook her head. "Just let him be here." Judge Whitman cleared his throat. "We'll now hear statements regarding the evidence." The prosecutor stood and began reading a summary. The defendant was identified by an eyewitness as defacing government property. "Excuse me," Elias interrupted, standing slowly. The judge bristled. "Sir, I said you were welcome as family, not counsel." "I understand, Your Honor," Elias replied, voice calm. "But I've reviewed the police report, and as the sitting U.S. Secretary of Defense, I'm also a federal officer with jurisdiction to observe and intervene in any case involving potential civil rights violations." That turned some heads. Whitman's lips thinned. "This is a local matter," which became a federal matter the moment you denied an 82-year-old woman bail for a nonviolent, unproven accusation, without evidence, while allowing her to sit in jail for 2 nights based on one unreliable witness and no surveillance footage. The judge gripped the arms of his chair. "Mr. Dorsey." Elias stepped forward now, slow, measured. "I know this courtroom. I know this county, and I know your reputation, Judge Whitman." "You're out of line," the judge said, voice shaking slightly. "No," Elias replied. "I'm just not afraid to say the part nobody else will." The room was silent. Then Elias turned to the prosecutor. "Let's talk about your evidence. The alleged vandalism happened at 11:47 a.m., correct?" The young man stammered. Yes, that's what's in the report." "And the eyewitness claims she saw my mother spray paint the wall." "Correct." "Yes. Was any spray paint found on her clothes?" "No." "On her hands?" "No." "Was any found in her purse, her car, or anywhere nearby?" The prosecutor swallowed. "No." "Then what's your case built on?" The young man fumbled with his papers. "There was, an anonymous tip." Elias raised an eyebrow. "Anonymous tips aren't facts." "Did you pull security footage from the nearby building?" "It was requested but not reviewed before pressing charges." There was no answer. Elias turned back to the judge. "She's been in custody for 48 hours. You saw her age, her health, her record, yet you denied bail based on what?" "Your own discomfort with a black woman standing in your courtroom without fear." That hit. Clara sat still, her face unreadable, but her eyes locked on her son. Judge Whitman shifted in his seat. "You're making dangerous assumptions, Mr. Dorsey." "No, sir. I'm stating facts. You didn't treat her like a person. You treated her like a problem." A low murmur moved through the gallery. Elias stepped back, his voice softer now. "She taught children how to read when this county refused to fund schools in black neighborhoods. She worked the same job for 40 years without ever asking for anything but respect. And you're going to tell me she's suddenly a criminal based on a guess?" The judge stared at his bench, not speaking. "I'm not here to embarrass you," Elias continued. "I'm here to remind you that power without accountability is just abuse in a robe." He sat down again. Clara still hadn't said a word. The judge cleared his throat, flipping through the file again. Though it was clear he wasn't reading anymore. Just stalling. "Charges will be reviewed," he finally said. "Pending further evidence, the court will dismiss all charges against Miss Dorsey immediately." The prosecutor looked relieved. The public defender looked stunned. Clara looked calm, like she knew this day was coming. Elias turned to her and smiled just a little. She gave him that look only mothers give, the one that says, "Thank you, and I told you so," all at once. But it wasn't about winning. It never was. It was about making sure they knew they were seen. When Clara stepped out of the courtroom, the sun hit her face like a blessing. She paused at the top of the courthouse steps, took one long breath, and let it go slow, like she was pushing something heavy out of her lungs. Elias stood beside her, hands in his pockets, scanning the street. He hadn't taken off his suit jacket despite the heat. Always formal, always sharp, just like his daddy. People were watching now, not just the church folks and the court staff, but strangers too. A few had filmed the last moments of the hearing. Someone had already posted it online. "Do you want me to say something to the press?" Elias asked. Clara shook her head. "I want to go home. I got pies to finish." He chuckled, but there was still tension in his shoulders. "You sure?" "I didn't go in there looking for a fight," she said. "But I wasn't about to let them humiliate me either." They walked slowly toward the car. Her knees still ached, and Elias offered her his arm, which she accepted, not because she had to, but because he was her boy. As they pulled away, Clara looked back at the courthouse one last time. Her face didn't show anger, just understanding. The kind of understanding that only comes from living long enough to know what you can change and what takes longer. That night, Clara sat on her porch with her shoes off and her apron back on. A pound cake cooled on the windowsill. The scent floated through the yard like it was inviting folks in. Miss Lorraine came by just after sundown, holding a stack of church bulletins. "You all right?" she asked. "I'm fine," Clara said. "Just tired. I seen the video online. Your boy lit that courtroom up." Clara chuckled. "He gets that from his father. That quiet thunder." Lorraine sat beside her. "You think anything going to change?" Clara was quiet for a long moment. "Maybe not today. But people saw. People heard. And when folks see the truth, even just for a second, they can't unsee it." Lorraine nodded. "Still a shame what they did." Clara sipped her tea. "It's always a shame, but it's not new." She leaned back, looking up at the stars. "When I was a girl," she said, "they wouldn't even let us sit in the library. Had to get our books through a back door. And when we finally got our own space, they gave us hand-me-down shelves and chairs that squeaked when you breathed too hard. But we made it a place worth walking to." She turned to Lorraine. "You know why? Why? Because we showed up, even when they told us not to. Even when they made it hard. And that scared them more than anything." The next Sunday at church, Clara walked in like she always did, hat tilted just right, purse matching her shoes, smile soft but present. But this time, people stood when she entered, not because she asked them to, but because they knew. Even the kids who usually squirmed in the pews sat still when she passed. One little girl tugged her mother's sleeve and whispered, "That's the lady from the video." Clara didn't say much. She didn't need to. Her presence did the talking. And later that week, the city council quietly reinstated the funding for the book mogul. No press release, no public apology. But it happened. Back in D.C., Elias sat in his office and opened a small package his mother had mailed. Inside was a photo of her in front of the school where she used to work, holding a children's book and smiling. On the back, she'd written just 6 words: "Always speak, even when it trembles." He kept it on his desk, right next to the Constitution. We don't always get justice right away, but we get moments. Moments that crack the silence. Moments that plant seeds. And sometimes, those seeds grow into things bigger than we ever imagined. If you're watching this, and something about Clara's story made you stop and think, don't let it end here. Speak up, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it trembles. Because silence is what they count on.